Okay, so welcome everybody to this move to Malaga. What we're going to do is we've got a panel of specialists. We're actually going to start with Jett. So over to you, Jett.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name's Jett Parker-Holland. I'm from Spectrum IFA Group. So we're one of the largest advisory firms across Europe. So we're really here to help you get you from where you are into Spain. So I'm just going to start off by introducing myself, discuss some of the more important facets of tax residency and when you will become a Spanish tax resident. I'm then going to discuss what you need to do before you become Spanish tax resident, then what you can do after you become Spanish tax resident, and then there'll be some time at the end for a few questions. So I'll just start off a little bit about me. I'm Jett Parker-Holland. I'm an advisor with Spectrum IFA. I'm a chartered wealth manager holding a master's degree in investments, and importantly, I'm a member of the CISI and a former investment manager. I deal primarily with British and English-speaking expats that make the move to Spain, importantly consolidating their finances that are in the UK or abroad, and then structuring them for the move to Spain so that those finances then work for them once they become Spanish resident. So one thing that a lot of clients usually tell me is, I wish I'd spoken to you earlier. So what I'd say is that if you're thinking about making the move to Spain and you're serious, please get in touch with one of us, because we can help guide you from a period where you're even thinking about moving to Spain and help hold your hand all the way along, making sure that everything is done right at the right time and in the right order. So the best analogy that I can find is people compare it to driving on the left hand to the right hand side of the road. So in the UK, we're used to driving on the left. You move to Spain and everything is all of a sudden on the right. It's a little bit that way when it comes to finances, that everything that was right in the UK is not necessarily well aligned for your new life in Spain. So what's the important point of this? Well, the important point is determining when you become that Spanish fiscal resident, and that happens at a very precise point. So typically we look at something called the 183-day rule. This means that you will become a Spanish tax resident once you've spent 183 days or more in Spain. So that means that if you spend more than 6 months in the country, in Spain, in the year, you will be considered a Spanish tax resident. That's regardless of whether you've got your visa or your residency. From the Spanish perspective, from the Spanish tax office, you will be considered to be liable for Spanish tax from the beginning of the year in which you spent the majority of the year in Spain. So what does that mean? If you're looking at moving to Spain sometime in the near future, so if you're looking at moving either this year or the first half of next year, you will be looking at being a Spanish resident from the 1st of January 2026. So the Spanish tax year is the same as the calendar year. So it's important that when you're making your move, that you plan for which year that you'll be doing certain things. And this planning stage of getting your residency and becoming Spanish tax resident is very, very important. So what do you need to do at each stage? So if you're looking to become a Spanish tax resident, i.e. you will look to move to Spain for more than 6 months in the year, there'll be a period of time where you'll be in your home country, perhaps the UK or elsewhere, and you'll have the opportunity to take certain actions before you become Spanish tax resident. Principally, we advise that because tax institutions are more favourable elsewhere, that it's advisable to, as we say, gather your gold before you make the move to Spain. So what does this mean? This means things like selling your home. In most countries, there is a more favourable tax regime on selling your home than it will be once you move to Spain. If you're a UK resident, you may be familiar with ISAs, which are a tax-efficient investment scheme. Again, that is much better to dissolve while you're still a UK resident and you're still getting those tax breaks. For other investments you may have, ISAs, premium bonds, investments, really important to look at crystallising those while you're still a UK resident. And this is often the same in other countries as well. Why do we say this? Because the taxes in Spain tend to be somewhat higher than they are in the UK, the US, and other European countries. So it's much better to take on that tax, potentially more tax, while you're a UK resident or a foreign resident before you move to Spain, because we can then structure that wealth once you move to Spain far more efficiently than if you bring it with you to Spain. It's then no longer tax efficient, and we then have to unpick things to get things structured the right way for you. Another important point, if you're a UK resident, is taking your pension tax-free lump sum. Now, if you're over the age of 55 and eligible, you can take 25% of your pension tax-free. If that applies to you, then this is something that's really important to do before you become a Spanish tax resident, as this potentially frees up a lot of your money ready for your move to Spain. So then you've sold your house, you've liquidated your assets, you're then ready to make the move to Spain. A significant part of the next process, buying a house. Very important for the residency process, and it really is the first step on getting your new life settled in Spain. Some people choose to rent, of course. Buying a home is one of the more common options for retirees and people moving to Spain. Once you know how much you want to spend on a home and getting everything sorted, typically that's a really good time to organize your finances. So it's always worth speaking to us, because we can help with things like mortgages, spectrum mortgages, but also we can look at organizing your finances, having a look at how things were structured in the UK, potentially restructuring them for Spain. And this can involve tax structuring, investment management. We can look at doing pension transfers, which are very important, as your UK pension provider is unlikely to be able to service you once you become an EU resident. And importantly, we also offer solutions for US individuals, which is very uncommon in Europe, but we do have access to providers that are able to get those US compliant products, including 401ks and IRAs. So if you're a US citizen looking to move to Spain, that's also another place where we can help. But really what I want to emphasize is getting the right advice early on so that you can plan. So really just to look over what a timeline would look like, the first step that I'd always recommend is speaking to an advisor. Even if you're just considering moving to Spain, making the right decisions at the right time will really make a huge difference once you're committed and you're ready to make the move. Once you know that you're ready, it's time to free up the assets. Make sure that you're taking the least amount of tax possible and freeing up that well so that you can restructure it efficiently for your new life in Spain. Then is the fun bit. You make the move, you come to Spain, eventually becoming a Spanish tax resident, and then we want to help make those finances work for you. So ideally, we help set everything up right, and then you don't have to worry about it again, because once it's set up right, it takes so much stress out, and you know that everything is set up exactly how you need, continuing for your life in Spain. So if I had to sum it up, I'd have to say plan your move early. It's never too early, but it can be too late. So if you are considering moving to Spain, or you know you're making the move to Spain, and you'd like to know how your finances or tax could be structured best to suit you, then please get in touch, because we really will be able to help. Okay, now I'm going to move on to some questions. I don't see any new questions coming up, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them. But I'll go through the ones that we already have submitted. So I've got my first question from Yvonne around a question to do with the timing to sell real estate in California to avoid extra taxes. Okay, so this really goes back to the points that I was just making there. It really is better to get these things sorted before you make a move. So in the US, there will always be taxes on the sale of real estate, depending on where you live. But the timing becomes important in this, because if you sell while you're still a US citizen, you will only be paying the US taxes on the property. If you wait until you become a Spanish resident, there will also be Spanish taxes to pay on the gain of an overseas asset, essentially. Once you become a Spanish fiscal resident, they won't just look at the assets that are in Spain, they will look at worldwide assets. So really, you're better off owning that property in California before you move to Spain. As there is a double taxation treaty, it's worth mentioning, but you will never get out of the higher of the tax rate. So if there's a chance that the Spain is a higher tax rate, which it will be, you'll be better off selling while you're still in California. Again, this is part of the planning process that we help all our clients with. Okay, moving on to the next question. I've got a question from Stella. A question surrounding benefits, options, taxes, investments for non-lucrative visa and digital nomad visa for US citizens. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, but I'll just go through them one by one. So non-lucrative visa and digital nomad visa are fundamentally different things. Non-lucrative visa means that you can't work when you become a resident of Spain. Digital nomad, on the other hand, you can work and there is a more favorable tax regime. You can qualify for a reduced rate of tax and limit it to only Spanish sourced income. And you can also keep your 401ks and IRAs out of the Spanish system during that tax efficient windows. One thing to note is for US citizens, you still do need to be filing declarations to the IRS, but that's absolutely something that we can help set you up with a accountant that's able to make these filings. In terms of investments for US citizens, it's worth noting that there are restrictive US rules, the PFIC rules. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail on this webinar, but we do have access to solutions that we can help US citizens with in terms of not only investing, but their 401ks and their IRAs. Quickly, estate and inheritance tax. These still exist, but there are benefits for Andalusian residents that I'd rather discuss in a meeting. And again, this is someone that has, it seems, multiple dimensions to the requirements that they have for moving to Spain, and this is really something that requires an in-depth financial plan. Okay, third question from Lisa. If I sell my house, will I have to pay tax in Spain? Great question. It depends on when you are planning to sell your home. If you sell it before you become a Spanish tax resident, then there won't be any Spanish tax. If you sell it after becoming a Spanish tax resident, then yes, there will be Spanish taxes based on your worldwide capital gains. This can be up to 28%. So again, if you're looking at moving to Spain, this is something worth speaking to us about. I have a fourth question from Tony, asking about the Beckham law. Again, I would really recommend that if you're interested in the Beckham law, that you come in and speak to us about it, because this is something that we've helped clients with before. But just as a general overview, it's a special tax regime for non-residents for Spanish tax purposes. So you can get a significantly reduced rate of income on Spanish sourced income elsewhere. To qualify, you need to either be an employee that's getting a contract under a Spanish company, a company director of a Spanish company, or to be a business owner abroad and set up a subsidiary. These are quite difficult to set up, and so whether it's worth it for you depends on your circumstances, but the tax advantages can be very lucrative. If you think that might apply to you, please, again, come see us. I've got another question from Jackie. How much do you need in the bank? What is the best time to move without paying capital gains tax? Can we change our visas in the second year? So just to cover it quickly, non-lucrative visa, around 30,000 euros for the main applicant, again, 7,500 per dependent. I think this might be a better question for Daniel. Digital Nomad also has their own money in the bank that they need. But the best time to move without paying capital gains tax, again, selling before your Spanish residence. I'll leave the questions to changing visas to Daniel. There's also a mention of, can I have a hobby? Again, I think that's a good question for Daniel, but you can't with an NLV, you can with the digital nomad visa. And finally, one more from Norton Nilsson. Again, this has several different facets to it, but looking mainly in the areas of investment, double taxation. So it's worth noting that the US and Spain have a tax treaty. Most pensions and investments are only taxable in one place. You still will need to file with the IRS every year. Importantly, there will always be the situation where with double taxation, you will pay at least the maximum of the two. So that is always something to ensure, but there's also an amount of taxable relief. So again, it's really worth going through this with a financial plan, look at how things are set up and where the taxes will be treated accordingly. The other points about healthcare insurance, I'll leave to Sam, and again, some of the others, housing, renting versus buying, I'll leave to Michelle. So thank you everyone for your time, and if any more questions come up, please ping me. Moving on to, I believe it's Michelle?
Daniel.
Daniel. Yeah, hi. Hi, my name's Daniel. I'm standing in for Maria today. She's unfortunately got sick. She's got COVID or flu or something really, really horrible. So I'm standing in for her to kind of give you an update. So to give you a quick overview, Help a Hand Spain has been around 4 years, been around in the market for about 4 years. We're an independent immigration consultancy, and our focus is helping clients move to Spain and specifically helping them apply for residencies and visas. And we pride ourselves really on a personalized service, and we really help you think through all of the steps that you need to take. That includes driving license, town hall, registration, thinking about rentals, residencies, and even renewals when you're in Spain. The 3 key residency applications we help individuals with is the non-lucrative visa. Just to summarize that very quickly, the financial requirements on that are 28,800 for an individual. That needs to be demonstrated for the first year of the visa. When you renew the visa, you renew for 2 years, and you need to demonstrate double the money, or it's 36,000 for a couple. You can demonstrate the financial means through 3 things: either passive income, as you're not allowed to work. Jett mentioned you're not allowed to work on this visa, not even if you're working remotely for a company outside of Spain. And sometimes we get the question, how will they know? Well, you need to provide tax returns, and at some point you'll need to declare that income in Spain, and that's how they potentially can discover it. But they also have double taxation agreements between possibly your current country of residence and Spain, so they can also discover it through data sharing between governments as well. But back to the financial need, there are 3 ways: passive income, which can be shares, dividends, or rental income if you have a property that you're renting out. It can come from savings in the bank, or could come from, if you're retired and drawing a pension, it can come from pension income as well. You need to have clean police police criminal records checks. You will need to demonstrate you have health insurance coverage. For individuals that are coming from, say, the US, there isn't a reciprocal agreement in place for Social Security, so it is necessary to take a private health insurance. For individuals based in the UK, there is one benefit post-Brexit, which is the ability for individuals that are drawing a state pension to have the S1 form from the NHS health service, and that gives you access to public healthcare in Spain, which makes the need for private health insurance completely optional depending on your personal circumstances and needs. The key thing about this visa is it is a residency visa. You do need to be living in Spain, and the expectation is you're living more than 183 days per year in Spain. You can renew the visa for up to 5 years. It's initially applied for 1 year, but then you can renew it for 2 years at a time for a period of up to 5. And then after 5 years, if you qualify, you can apply for permanent residency. And to apply for permanent residency, you cannot leave Spain for more than 10 months in a 5-year period. On average, that's about 2 months per year. That's the key thing to be aware of for this particular visa. To summarize the digital nomad visa, it's a remote working visa. So if you work for a company or work for yourself, and that work is outside of Spain, you would be able to qualify for the visa. Whilst you can have clients based within Spain with this visa, if you're a freelancer or self-employed, you can't generate more than 20% of your income from those clients. So 80% or more of your income must be from outside of Spain. The financial requirements are 27,000 euros per month for an individual. It's another 1,000 euros on top of that if there's a couple applying. And if you're moving with a family, there is additional money required for individual dependents, which is around 330 euros on top. There are 2 ways to apply for this visa: a self-employed visa. So as I said, if you're working for yourself, and in some cases, if you have your own limited company, whilst it's more complex to apply as a limited company owner, you can still apply. And if you apply as self-employed in Spain, you'll get a visa for up to 3 years, and it can be renewed for a further 2 years. The alternative is if you're working for a corporate company, a registered company, you can apply as an employee of that company if the company is willing to approve that and sponsor you. And you can work for up to 2 years in Spain. And for countries that have a bilateral agreement for social security, it allows you to continue paying social security in the country in which you're working. If there isn't a bilateral agreement, and then unfortunately you don't qualify. But countries like Canada, the US, and the UK, and a handful of other ones do have that agreement and do allow you to apply that way as an employee. And the third main visa, residency, that we help with is for individuals that have an EU passport and may be married to someone, or have family that are non-EU and have non-EU passports, such as the UK. It is possible to apply for the EU residency through that route, or family member of EU, as it's sometimes known. And this also applies, it's a slightly different process, but it's called a arraigo familiar, and it's a process by which spouses or partners of Spanish citizens, if you're married to a Spanish citizen and want to move to Spain, you could also apply through this route as well. The financial requirements are a little bit different for EU residency. It's 7,500 euros for the first individual and 5,000 euros for a dependent for the first year. And depending on where you're moving to in Spain, you may be asked to show more money in the bank than that. So in a nutshell, those are the 3 main visas and the key requirements. I hope that's been useful, and I will take some questions. On the Help at Hand Spain website, you'll find a resource hub with details of all the residencies and visas and their requirements, and you'll even find a moving guide and a checklist to help you with your planning if you're planning to move in the future. There are many, many things that you have to think through, and we've tried to kind of pull that together in a list to help you with some of that planning as you go. And the last point I will make is that we don't just help with visas and residencies. As I mentioned before, we do help with driving license exchange. And it's important whenever you're working with an immigration professional, either someone that isn't, or a company that's independent, or with a legal organization or a lawyer, you can use either for these processes, just so you're aware. Do be aware and do make sure you ask the service provider what they cover in their fees, so to ensure you don't get any nasty surprises. When you work with Help at Hand Spain, we specifically make sure, and we're very transparent to ensure that the whole process is included, including the pieces of work that needs to happen after your visa is granted, and that's specifically the residence card and registration at the town hall when you arrive in Spain, which are very important procedural things that you need to do when you arrive. Just answering some of the questions that have been submitted very quickly. I think I've got 5 here to do. Beckham's Law, how do I qualify? This is, I think Jett covered some of this. This is applicable to digital nomad visa, to the digital nomad visa, but it only applies to employees if you're applying as an employee. If you're a freelancer or self-employed, unfortunately, despite what you may see online, you wouldn't qualify for Beckham's Law and the reduced tax rate. So that's something to be aware of. There's another question related to digital nomad visa, which is how do you prove your income if you are going self-employed through that route? You will do that by providing copies of your contracts with your clients, and they need to be registered companies, bank statements, and also a certificate of incorporation to prove that the company exists and that they have a good standing as well. Last two questions here. What is the process for an Irish passport holder? I've covered that already. You would need to apply for a family member of an EU citizen, if you're a UK passport holder, that is, or any other non-EU country. And the question goes on to say, are there any restrictions on your ability to stay while you're applying for residency? The key thing about applying for EU or family of EU is you do not need to apply via the consulate. You can go straight to Spain and you can apply directly in Spain when you arrive. So that's the key difference with this visa. Once you've applied, a non-EU family member needs to apply within 90 days. They have to be in a regular immigration status. So timing and planning before you move to Spain is important, particularly to ensure that you have all of the paperwork you need to present when you're in Spain, because getting that paperwork once you've already left Spain can be difficult and challenging, and will add unnecessary stress to the process. And the last question: private versus public healthcare versus insurance. I think I've covered that already. For countries that do have a social security agreement with Spain, for the purposes of the visa, you do have the ability to access public health care. Otherwise, you will need private insurance. The only exception to that is after you've been in Spain for a year, you do have the ability to apply for something called Convenio Especial, which is a specific program in Spain that allows you to pay for and have access to the public healthcare system. But there are some differences. For example, you do not have prescriptions covered if you are currently receiving medication. And then lastly, the last question related to this from this individual was around driving license. UK citizens will be glad to know that if they're moving to Spain, you do need to change your driving license within 6 months. In fact, that applies to anyone that's driving on an international driving permit, but for UK citizens, you can exchange your driving license. For other citizens, for example, the US, unfortunately, you do need to take a license, you do need to take a theory and practical test when you arrive in Spain. There's no possibility to exchange your license. So hopefully I've answered all of the questions, and I'm going to hand over to the next presenter.
It's me.
Michelle?
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Okay, so I'm Michelle Connor. I'm one of the co-owners of BluCee Real Estate, which was set up 9.5 years ago. We're based in Malaga. I'm just briefly going to go through the buying process, finding a property. So, finding a property, I'd say the most important things to consider are the area and where you're wanting to relocate to. Obviously, I cover the bottom part of Spain, and the reason I moved here was because I needed to have easy commute back to London, because my husband was working London to Malaga. So that for me was one main consideration. 30 minutes from an airport. Then lots of times people go for budget and what their requirements are. I think it's the wrong way to do it. I always say start with your budget and work back from there, because if I wanted a 4-bedroom house with lots of land, I couldn't have lived in the area that I am, which means my husband wouldn't have been able to commute easily to Malaga. So always try and say to people, start with your budget and then work out what your requirements are, and then we can try and focus on areas that actually suit your needs. And sometimes there are compromises. If budget's no option, then obviously find an area that's got everything that you need, whether you want to be near the coast, whether you want to be inland, whether you've got children that need to go to schools. Schools are a big consideration. Most people that have got children of school age want to be near an international school. The Spanish public system here is just as good as the international schools, if not better in some areas. So again, that's something that we can help you with as a real estate. My daughter's been through both public and the private system, and she's currently at university here. My business partner's children, again, one's in private and the other one's now in the public system. So again, we've got good experience of the different schooling in our areas. Time frames, obviously Jett's covered that, when the best time to sell your property in your home country, if that's what you're doing. Buying and renting. Okay, it's very, I mean, if you decide that you're going to buy and you've sold at the right time and all your taxes align and you find the property you want, then go ahead, by all means buy. If you can't find the property or you'll want to explore areas beforehand, then obviously renting is a way forward. Lots of areas of Spain, which are typically tourist, will only rent out of the into the low season, out of the high season. So you might only be able to get a rental agreement for 9 or 10 months of the year. Sometimes though, that's actually good because that gives you a chance to have a look around in areas where it's a tourist area, whether it's still, everything's still open during the winter months, because lots of areas do close completely. Thankfully in Malaga, everything seems to be open all year, but that's another consideration as well. With the buying process, say you find the property that you actually like, the next process would be agreeing an actual price and the conditions of the sale. That's obviously where we come in. By law, we have to put any offers that you give to the homeowner within 48 hours of receiving them. So even if your offer is, you know, sometimes we advise people that offer's really too low, they're not going to accept that. You know, we still have to put that offer to them. Okay, so if you feel really strongly that that's the offer you want to make, then we will put that offer to the owners. When we're negotiating the price, that's when we also negotiate the conditions of the sale. Sometimes we have people that want to buy really quickly. Sometimes people need a bit longer, like a house sale is going through in their own country and they can't purchase the house in Spain until after that's gone through. That's when we would agree with the vendors that the contract would have to be, you know, 6, 7, or even 8 months' time. It's quite common. Once we've agreed a price and the conditions, then we would type up a reservation contract. This is a reservation contract that's actually typed by us, the real estate. It is a legally binding contract, and we would ask for normally between 6,000 to 10,000 euros at that point, and that would remove the property from the property market. Once that contract has been signed by both parties and that deposit has been paid, then nobody else will view that property. Then you have 10 working days from that for the next contract to be signed. Basically, we would hand over all of the paperwork to the house to your lawyer, and your lawyer would do all the due diligence on the property, and they would type up the next contract. It can be called an arras or a private purchase contract. That contract, again, is legally binding, and that stipulates that you then pay the balance of 10% of the property purchase. So I'll make it very easy. So if you buy a property, you agree 100,000 euros to buy the property. Say we pay 5,000 euros to take it off of the market. On the second contract, which is drawn up by the lawyer, the arras contract, you would pay the balance of the 10%. So that would be another 5,000 because we already hold 5,000. If you change your mind and there's no reason apart from the paperwork is incorrect and the sale can't be completed, you would lose your 10% if you pull out to that point. But it also means that if the vendors change their mind or so they get a higher offer, they also have to pay you back your 10% and pay you another 10%. So I don't know if this happens in the States, but in the UK, it's very, right up until the day that you sign and you get your keys for your house, it's still quite volatile. Sometimes people come in with higher offers, it's called gazumping. I don't know if that happens in the States, but it definitely happens in the UK. This is one way of basically the buyer and the seller basically relaxing and saying, right, you're 100% serious, you've parted with a lot of money, and also knowing that the vendors are not going to pull out because they would be penalised by having to pay back a lot of money. So I think it's a very good system. Both of these contracts, the reservation contract and the arras contract, will set out all of the dates that the sale would be completed by. We've had sales go through in 10 working days. We've had one very quickly in the last month in 2 days from start to finish. There was no contracts, it went straight to the notary. That's very unusual. But we also have a sale at the moment, which it was agreed last October, and the sale's actually going through this October, because that suits both parties. One, because one party needed a mortgage and they needed to have more business accounts to show to the mortgage company, and the vendors wanted to be over a certain age to be able to get their tax benefits when they sold. So both parties had agreed that. So, you know, this process can be very flexible. I would just say that never be forced into signing something or doing something without your lawyer looking at it. I would definitely recommend using a lawyer to buy a property in Spain. When you buy a property in Spain, if there's any debts on the property, it stays with the property. So if you're buying a house and it has a mortgage on it, you need to make sure that that mortgage has been paid off before you sign. Otherwise, you're inheriting this debt. I've never come across the situation where somebody's inherited somebody else's debt, because the notaries now are very good, but it's something to be aware of, and that's one reason I would definitely stress using a lawyer. Paperwork in Spain, especially on, I'd say, the rural properties or small village properties, is very tricky. Continuously changing the law, being continuously asked what extra paperwork's needed. For instance, a lot of the village houses are quite higgledy-piggledy, so you may enter in on in say house number 4, but when you go upstairs, the rooms actually go out over house number 6 and house number 2. Now the rules now have changed a lot, where you need to basically have paperwork in place that states that house number 2 and house number 6, actually you have a right to have your property over the top of their piece of land. So it's definitely worth employing a lawyer. I would never buy property in Spain without a lawyer. That's just a very quick, brief run through on buying process. I'm just going to mention new builds. I've just been to a property exhibition, and lots of people were saying, I'm looking to buy a property in a year or 2 years, but I have some funds now. Anybody can buy a property in Spain. You don't actually have to be a resident at that point. If you are thinking about moving in a few years' time, consider buying a new build. You can buy off plan, and you put down deposits now. There's a payment structure, and then the build completes, say, in 2 years' time, 2.5 years' time, and that's when you pay the final payment. So it's a very good way of getting your foot on the ladder here, without the property prices going up and you being priced out. So I just want to get people to think about that is another option. I think I've touched most things very briefly. I'm just going to have a quick look down at my questions. Right, I think everyone else has covered most of the questions. There's one here from Sean, is asking about inland property information. Spain's a very big country. If you want to buy inland, you definitely need a lawyer. I would say, yeah, you need a lawyer. Some lawyers you'll talk to will tell you don't need this paperwork. Others will say you do need this paperwork. I mean, I can recommend, you know, good, honest lawyers who don't make money from doing that. You find the property you like, you can ask the agent, you know, what the property situation is, what's the paperwork like, and then get the lawyer to check it. And there's nothing wrong with checking the paperwork after you reserve the property, but you have to make sure that within that contract it states that if the property isn't sound, that you can buy the property, because there's paperwork issues, that you'll get your money refunded to you. I think that's a real quick rundown on property. Obviously, if you need any help finding a property, then please send me an email and one of the team will contact you. I do believe I'm now handing over to Joseph.
Thanks very much, Michelle. So yes, I'm Joseph. I'm one of the senior traders here at Lumon. I've been here for 10 years now, and for much of that time, what I've been doing is helping people buy property predominantly in Spain, although it is over the rest of Europe as well. And where we come in is both at the beginning and at the end of the process here. Like Michelle was very clearly explained with the process, if you need to pay a deposit, you might want to move really quickly to take that property off the market. We can help with everything from that initial deposit, making sure the right amount of euros land in the right place with the lawyer over in Spain, abogados as they're called, and then right at the end we can help with the larger transaction, and once again making sure the right amount lands where it needs to. And one of the questions that many of you might wonder is, well, why would I use a currency broker or an international payment specialist rather than just go to my bank? And there's a number of reasons, and I'll keep it very brief. I don't want to bore some of you here, but where we come in is we can help you get very competitive prices. So on a like-for-like basis, our role is to try and help you save money when compared to your bank. That would be the most obvious reason for using an entity such as us. The other reason, of course, as well, is timing. So Michelle gave a very good example of the very quick and the drawn out 1 year process that it can take out in Spain, and it depends really on both the buyers and the vendors' preference, but typically it can take 2 to 3 months. I'm sure a lot of the people watching this would agree, but a lot can happen in the currency markets in that time. So if you're of a risk adverse nature and you don't like the idea of viewing a property and then it becoming a lot more expensive to buy later down the line because the pound has had a big fall in its value, for example, you can trade, by trade I mean convert your pounds into euros very early into the process, that way negating any negative market movement and the property becoming a lot more expensive. So the second most important thing, and that I think comes into this, would be the timing. And just to add to that, you wouldn't need to pay all of your cash up front. You can lock in the rate using just a 10% deposit, giving you complete clarity. The system over there is great. Once you put down the deposit, you wouldn't need to worry about being messed around, gazumped, because you're then obligated to buy the property. The vendor is obligated to sell the property to you. They've got a much firmer and secure system than we have over here in the UK. And then once the currency rate is fixed in, you know what it's going to cost, and then you can think about the dream home or the lifestyle rather than the boring money market. So I think that would be a nice way to put it in a nutshell as to how the process works and where we come in. Another thing to be very wary of is some Spanish banks will charge you to receive funds into a Spanish account over there, particularly an account in your own name. We can avoid that happening. The way we wire the funds via our EU banking system will ensure that the exact amount we send will arrive. It's a good idea to get in touch nice and early when you're in this process. Coming back to Michelle's point again, it can be good to look at what your budget is. In the 10 years I've been here, we've had some people that have actually converted their currency prior to even going out to view properties because they knew the region that they wanted to buy in, but they wanted to know what they can afford and didn't want any nasty surprises. So just to sort of list off a few bullet points there that I've made, we can offer safe and secure transfers from our experienced team and know-how of the system. Over in Spain, competitive exchange rates, you will avoid banking charges. You have the ability to control the cost of this whole transaction rather than leaving it up to chance, because the markets are moving by the seconds, let alone by the day. There are different types of contract offers where you could either lock in the rate nice and early, paying for it all up front, or paying a 10% deposit and then telling us how long you need to send the outstanding balance. So we are very flexible there, and once you get in touch I could talk you through that in a bit more detail. And we are of course authorised by the FCA to perform this service. We have done for 25 years and I've been here for 10 of those. I've just got a couple of quick questions from some of the viewers. Stephen asked, is my money safe? Very straightforward question. As we're authorised by the FCA as an e-money institution, as soon as your funds arrive with us, they're segregated with no upper limit as to the level of safeguarding. So they don't accrue any interest. They're not doing anything clever behind the scenes, but there's no cap on the level of protection that you have. And it works in a very similar nature to an escrow account with a solicitor. And then James has asked, can you inform us on when to trade. So nobody knows where the market's going to go. All we can do is look at where it's been historically and where you sit in relation to that. We can provide you with updates if the market was to dramatically jump in your favor. A big part of our service is helping with the timing, and also give you an insight into upcoming important economic data releases. But you know, without a crystal ball, you never know where it's going to go. And I think reacting to market movements, or if you're of a risk adverse nature, locking in nice and early would always be worthwhile. You could always trade in tranches. So that's all the questions for me. So I believe that it's my turn now to hand over to Sam. But do get in touch nice and early into the process if you are considering buying over in Malaga or anywhere else in Spain, and we'll be happy to give you some insight. Thank you.
Hey, Joseph, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I'd just like to start by saying thank you also to Lumon for hosting this webinar, to Jett, to Michelle, to Daniel, and also to Joseph for all of the great answers and information obviously they're sharing with everybody today. So I hope you're all awake still. I am Sam Campbell. I am an insurance broker in Spain. I've been here for 25 years. I live on the Costa del Sol, so the southernmost point of Spain, where we are very lucky with almost 365 days of sunshine every year. I have been in insurance now for 14 years, and I'm regulated by the Junta Andalucía. So I actually cover all aspects of insurance. Obviously, today here to talk about insurance that you're going to need to come over to Spain to comply with visa regulations. So in order obviously to have a visa compliant medical insurance policy, you must have a fully comprehensive policy, which means basically it is paid for upfront for the year. It mustn't have any co-payments or deductibles, and it must be in line with the Spanish healthcare system. So it must cover absolutely everything. So how do you go about getting this? Well, obviously, once I think you probably started with Jett, or maybe Daniel, Michelle, Joseph, you come to me at the end because you've virtually got everything in place. And then obviously the insurance certificate is the most important thing. So basically we would have a conversation about where you're looking to live, because one of the most important things about private health insurance, it is postcode sensitive. So obviously you would have narrowed down where you're going to move to, or the areas that you think you're going to move to. And then obviously the quote is then actually based on your date of birth, the postcode of where you're going to live as well are the two most important things. And from there, obviously, we can start looking for quotes for you. Now, obviously, it's important to note that, as I've mentioned, it mustn't have any exclusions on the policy, which obviously we understand that people will have pre-existing medical conditions, maybe have had operations throughout their lifetime, etc., etc. So that's where my role as a broker comes in, to obviously spend the time understanding you as the client, understanding your medical history if you do have one, and then obviously advising from there the best companies to actually go to get a quote for you. Now, as a broker that specializes in the expat market, I obviously work with a lot of big companies, and it's very important, obviously, to be working with insurance companies that are actually allowed to sell a policy in Spain as well. And for me, it's important to understand the client's needs, what they're looking for, and obviously understand if they can speak Spanish, or they purely want to deal with companies that will have English-speaking representatives, whether they're doctors, hospitals, etc., etc. And then obviously from there, we find you the ideal policy. How does it compare to the Spanish health system or private healthcare? Obviously, you would have obviously more choice of private institutions, walk-in medical centres. You'd have more choices of hospitals. So for example, I'm on the Costa del Sol. So the Costa del Sol is serviced now by 3 hospitals, from Malaga right through to coming up to Gibraltar. But obviously, it's very, very heavily saturated down here because we have so many people, obviously, that want to come and enjoy all year round sunshine that have relocated over. So why would you take private healthcare over taking state? Obviously, if you have the choices, because obviously the waiting times are a lot shorter if you go private. We have so many private hospitals along here. We have so many private walk-in centres. Appointment times obviously are a lot quicker. And again, obviously in the more concentrated areas, you're virtually guaranteed to be dealt with by an English speaker as well. So in my opinion, obviously, when you are looking to come over and to get medical insurance, a lot of people do go directly to the companies online and do obviously apply then for their medical insurance. But I do advise that it's always best to speak to a broker, because we can actually advise, help you, hold your hand through the whole process as well. We know obviously what the insurance companies are looking for, you know, ideally. We know obviously the companies that are more flexible than other companies as well to speak to. And we make sure we have everything ready and available for you in your language so you understand exactly what you are buying. Then obviously when the policy has been issued, we make sure we issue you with the documents that are visa compliant as well. So that's basically the process here. Just looking very, very quickly at the questions. I think there's really probably only one question, which I think I might have touched on, which is obviously private versus public healthcare on that side. They are the differences. I've been here 25 years. Obviously, I have my own company. I'm entitled to the state, which I have, but I've also been running private healthcare for 20 years whilst I've been here. And the reason for that is I just like to feel more comfortable dealing with any healthcare issues that I may have in my own language. I don't need to have it. I've used both. It's just a choice that I have. And it is just, for me, obviously, I get quicker waiting times if I want to make an appointment. So it's just really a personal thing from my side why I have it. So I can obviously give you comparisons, scenarios between both of them, having got both of them myself. I think really that's it. I can't actually see any other questions anybody wants to ask with regards to that. So what I'm actually going to do now then is pass back to Michelle, because I think Michelle obviously is going to do our question and answer session. Yeah?
I don't know, Joseph, is there any questions coming? Because I can't actually see any questions. If there any come in since we've been online? Joseph, we can't hear you.
I can.
Sorry,
There you go. Sorry. Are there any questions?
I've got one here that says, how would it work if one wanted to purchase a Spanish property and maintain a property in England?
It's only one for Jett, I would have said. I mean, you can own property in both countries, but obviously you're liable to certain taxes. If you're not talking about actually moving to Spain and keeping your property abroad, so just using your holiday home here, then you do actually have to pay a non-residence tax, which isn't that high. But obviously, Jett would be able to explain if you do it the other way around.
Could you repeat the question, please, Joseph?
Yeah, it was in regards to owning property both in Spain and also in the UK, and if that's possible.
Yeah, it is possible. Some people like to keep their UK home sometimes when they move to Spain, certainly if they're not fully committed. Generally, what this would involve is if you do rent it out, then you will need to pay income tax on any rental income. And you'll also need to pay any capital gains tax on if you sell it. So that can be rolled into a new property purchase. So if you purchase a property that is of the same value or greater, you can then roll in that capital gain from the UK property. But the short answer is yes, you can own both. I would probably, no, I won't make a judgment on it. For some people, it's right, especially if you think there's a chance that you are looking to move back to the UK.
Okay, there was another one that's directly for you as well there, Jett. It says, what is the total all-in cost of the products or services you are offering at Spectrum IFA Group? And that's from Morton.
Okay, thank you, Morton. Morton, it completely depends on the plan that we come to together. So we have quite an array of tools at our disposal. For instance, we have different tax structuring products, we have investment products, we have US compliant products, all of which are structured differently, and of course the fees for those are different are different. And of course, it depends on the amount you're investing and the complexity of your investments. So how long's a piece of string? Please get in touch, and we're very transparent about fees, but not something that we can discuss without really having a deep dive into your plans to move to Spain.
And Aishan has asked, how much is the school fees for international students per year in Spain?
Okay, it varies. My daughter at the moment's at a private university. If you pay the full year in advance, you get a discount, or you can do stage payments. My daughter's university fees for this year were €5,700, so a lot cheaper than the UK and the States. Daniel might be able to touch on the other schooling systems, because I know that both his children are in private school as well.
Yes, I can talk about a couple of schools in Malaga. Children have been to two in the Malaga region. The fees per year are on average between 8,000 to 10,000 euros per student.
Yeah, this depends on the school and obviously the location of the school.
Yeah. If you go further down towards Marbella, you'll find that the prices are far more expensive. Directly in Malaga, they're a bit more reasonable.
I will say though that there's lots of options for the private schools here, because my daughter went to a Spanish private school, which was bilingual. There's obviously British schools, there's French schools, there's a Dutch school, there's a Danish school, and obviously they teach English, Spanish, and obviously the home language as well. There's lots of options in this area.
And the last one is, do you need insurance if you are an EU citizen?
I think Daniel answered that, yeah. So
I can take that. So if you're an EU citizen, it depends on your circumstances. If you're retiring to Spain and you're from the UK and you're currently receiving your state pension, you do have the ability to use the S1 form from the UK that gives you access to public healthcare in Spain, and then private insurance is optional. If you're from the US, for example, that doesn't have the agreement, you will need private healthcare insurance. The exception to that is if you are moving to Spain and you have a job with a Spanish company, or you are currently self-employed where you're living now and you plan to register as self-employed in Spain. In either of those two cases, when you're working for a Spanish company or for yourself, you have the right to Spanish healthcare as a worker.
Okay. Well, thanks to everyone for tuning in this evening. And if you did have any more specific questions for any of us, you've got our names and the companies we work for in the headers. We're very easy and approachable to speak to, so please don't hesitate to get in touch. And thanks for watching tonight. Okay.
thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.